My husband stood up at our anniversary party and told everyone, "Behind every successful man is a woman who knows when to stay quiet and look pretty." I stood up and said, "Let's see how successful you are when I actually stay quiet." The next morning, I stopped doing everything I'd been doing behind the scenes to keep his life running. For 11 years, I'd been ghostwriting his emails, preparing his presentations, and feeding him every brilliant idea he'd ever pitched to his board of directors. They called him visionary while I sat in the background, smiling and staying quiet just like he wanted. First day, nothing changed. He had meetings scheduled that I'd already prepared for. Day 3, his assistant called me asking for the quarterly report summary he usually had ready. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. She said he always had bullet points prepared. I said maybe he should prepare them himself this time. Day 5, he bombed his first presentation. He stood in front of 20 executives with slides I hadn't reviewed, trying to explain a strategy I hadn't mapped out for him. His boss pulled him aside afterward and asked if everything was okay at home. He laughed and said I was probably just hormonal. Week 2, he missed 3 critical contract details because I wasn't reading his emails at 6 a.m. anymore, highlighting what actually mattered and writing his responses while he was in the shower. A $1 million deal fell through because he didn't catch a liability clause I would have flagged immediately. His boss was less understanding this time. Week 3, his biggest client called the CEO directly to complain. My husband had sent an email full of typos and contradictions because he'd actually written it himself for once. The CEO forwarded it to the entire leadership team as an example of unacceptable communication. The same husband who'd won an award for business communication excellence the previous year, an award he'd accepted while I sat in the audience knowing I'd written every word of his winning proposals. Month 2 was when the panic really set in. He had to present the annual strategic plan, the one I usually spent 3 weeks crafting while he played golf with potential investors. He locked himself in his office for 72 hours straight, emerging with a 10-slide PowerPoint that looked like a high school project. The board asked him if he'd had a stroke. One member actually suggested he take medical leave. His assistant started typing up his meeting notes because he couldn't remember half of what was discussed without me texting him real-time summaries from the parking lot where I used to sit with my laptop, listening to his calls on speaker. She quit after 2 weeks when he screamed at her for not knowing what he was thinking. 3 months in, he got put on a performance improvement plan. The man who'd been fast-tracked for senior vice president was now having weekly check-ins with HR, like a fresh graduate who couldn't figure out email. His boss assigned him a mentor, a 28-year-old kid who had to teach him how to use the project management software I'd been secretly running for him since 2015. His brother called me, begging. He said my husband was falling apart, drinking every night, calling him at 3 a.m., asking how to create pivot tables in Excel. The same brother who used to joke that I had the easiest life, just supporting my genius husband. I told him my husband was a grown man who could figure out his own pivot tables. The intervention came in month 4. His entire family gathered at our house, which was now a disaster because he couldn't figure out how to schedule the cleaning service, pay the lawn crew, or remember when the pool maintenance was supposed to happen. The kitchen had fruit flies because he didn't know garbage day was Tuesday and recycling was Thursday. His mother sat there crying, asking me why I was destroying her successful son. His father accused me of sabotage. His sister said I was being vindictive and petty. I pulled out my laptop and showed them 11 years of work. Every presentation he'd ever given. Every email that had impressed his bosses. Every strategy document. Every analysis. Every clever solution to a complex problem. All created by me. His mother picks up my laptop with shaking hands and starts scrolling through the files I've opened. I watch her face change from angry red to confused pale to something that looks like she might be sick. She clicks on a presentation from 2019, the one that got him promoted to director. And I see her eyes scanning the document properties at the bottom of the screen where it shows my name as the creator, my computer as the origin, timestamps from 2 a.m., when I was working on it while he slept. She opens another file, then another, each one showing the same information, 11 years of evidence that her genius son was actually just good at taking credit. His father leans over her shoulder and I see his jaw get tight as he realizes what he's looking at. His sister has gone quiet in the corner, staring at her brother like she's seeing him for the first time. His father closes my laptop with more force than necessary and looks around the room at his family. He says we need to talk about this privately. Just family, and I feel that old familiar anger rising up in my chest. I tell him I am family. I've been family for 11 years, and I'm done with private conversations where everyone pretends I'm the problem. His mother starts to say something about how this is between their son and me, but I cut her off. I remind her that she's the one who gathered everyone here to tell me I was destroying him, so now she gets to hear the truth about what I was actually building for him all these years. His father's face goes red, but he doesn't say anything back, and I realize this might be the first time I've ever directly disagreed with him without my husband there to smooth things over. His brother stands up and pulls my husband into the kitchen. I can hear them through the doorway, their voices getting louder as the brother asks why he never mentioned I was doing all this work. My husband's voice gets defensive, saying I'm making it sound worse than it was, that I just helped him organize his thoughts sometimes. The brother's voice rises, and he asks if helping means writing every single word, and my husband says I'm exaggerating, that I maybe did some of the research, but he did the real work of presenting it. I hear something slam, maybe a hand on the counter, and the brother says he's been covering for him at family dinners for months, making excuses for why his career was falling apart. And now he finds out it's because his brother is actually incompetent without his wife doing his job for him. My husband says something I can't hear, and then the brother comes back into the living room alone, shaking his head. His sister moves from the corner and sits down next to me on the couch. She asks quietly if this is really all true, if I really did everything in those files. I pull my laptop back open and navigate to the original files, not the polished final versions, but the working documents with all my notes and revisions. I show her the creation dates going back to 2013, the edit history showing hundreds of changes all made by me, the comment threads where I argued with myself about the best way to explain complex strategies. I open the email folder where I saved all his requests over the years, the messages asking me to write his quarterly updates, to fix his presentations, to respond to his clients because he didn't know what to say. She reads through them and her face changes, and when she looks at me, there's something like understanding there. She asks why I never said anything, and I tell her I did. Lots of times. But he always said it was just helping. That this is what supportive wives do. The intervention falls apart after that. His mother starts crying, saying she should have noticed something was wrong, but she thought he was just stressed from work. His father gets angry, and I can't tell if he's mad at me for revealing everything, or at his son for lying about his abilities for over a decade. The brother sits down heavily in the armchair and puts his head in his hands. His sister tries to ask him why he let this happen, but he just sits there on the other couch, getting smaller somehow, like he's physically shrinking under the weight of everyone finally seeing the truth. His mother asks him if he has anything to say, and he opens his mouth but nothing comes out. His father stands up and says they need to go, that they need time to process this, and suddenly everyone's gathering their things and heading for the door. Nobody looks at me as they leave. Nobody looks at him either. After they leave, the house feels too quiet. He tries to talk to me, but I'm so tired I can barely stand. I tell him I'm sleeping in the guest room and he needs to figure out his own problems now because I'm done being his secret weapon. He asks what he's supposed to do, and I say the same thing I told his brother about the Excel tables, that he's a grown man who can figure it out himself. He follows me upstairs asking me to just talk about this, but I close the guest room door and lock it. I hear him standing outside for a while before his footsteps finally move away down the hall. I wake up the next morning and the house is empty. His car is already gone from the garage, and I realize he left for work without saying anything, without trying to talk about last night. There's a note on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker, his handwriting messy like he wrote it in a hurry. It says, please just help him with one more presentation, just this once, and then we can talk about everything else later. He promises it's the last time, that he just needs to get through this one meeting and then he'll figure out how to do it himself. I read the note twice and then I walk over to the trash can and throw it away. I'm done with just one more time and we'll talk later, and I promise I'll change. I pull out my phone and scroll through my contacts until I find Natalie's number. We were roommates in college, back before I met my husband, back when I still thought I was going to have my own career. She's been telling me for years that I should use my skills for something besides making my husband look good. I call her and she answers on the first ring like she was waiting next to her phone. She says she's been waiting for this call for 10 years, and I laugh even though I want to cry. I tell her I finally stopped helping him, and she doesn't ask what happened. She just asks what I need. Natalie works in corporate consulting now, helping companies fix their communication problems and develop their strategies. She says firms are desperate for people who can do what I do, people who can do strategic thinking and clear communication, and turn complex ideas into presentations that actually make sense. She rattles off 3 companies she knows that are hiring right now, positions that would pay more than I ever imagined making. She asks if I can meet her for coffee that afternoon, and I say yes before I can talk myself out of it. She gives me the name of a place downtown and tells me to bring samples of my work, the real files with my name on them. At the coffee shop, Natalie's already there waiting at a corner table. She hugs me hard and tells me I look terrible, but she's proud of me anyway. There's a man with her, tall and professional looking in a suit that probably costs more than my car. Natalie introduces him as Ryan Weber, a headhunter who specializes in corporate strategy positions. She told him about me this morning and he wanted to meet me right away. Ryan shakes my hand and we sit down and I pull out my laptop. I show him the files, the real ones with my name as the author, and he scrolls through them with his eyebrows getting higher and higher. He looks at a presentation I did for a pharmaceutical company merger and asks who gave me the data. I tell him I compiled it myself from public sources and industry reports. He opens a strategic plan I wrote for a market expansion and asks where I learned this framework. I tell him I developed it by reading business journals and studying what actually worked. He finally looks up from the screen and asks me the question I've been asking myself for months now. He wants to know why I've been hiding this talent for 11 years. I don't have a good answer for him except the truth, which is that I got married young and my husband's career took off fast, and I just sort of slipped into being the person who made everything work behind the scenes. Ryan nods like he's heard this story 100 times before and tells me it's common, but it doesn't have to be my story anymore. He closes my laptop and slides it back across the table and says he wants to start setting up interviews for me this week if I'm ready. Natalie reaches over and squeezes my hand, and I realize I'm shaking a little bit, but not from fear. From something else I can't quite name yet. Ryan pulls out his phone and starts scrolling through his contacts and tells me there are 3 firms he thinks would be perfect for what I can do. He explains that my skills are worth 6 figures easily, maybe more depending on the role in the company. I almost laugh because the number he's talking about is more than I ever imagined making, and I've been doing this exact level of work for free while my husband collected the salary and the promotions and the awards and the recognition. Ryan asks if I can meet with the first company tomorrow afternoon, and I say yes before I can talk myself out of it. He sends me the details right there at the table and tells me to bring my portfolio, the real one with my name on everything. Natalie walks me to my car after and hugs me hard and tells me this is just the beginning, and I want to believe her. That evening, I'm making dinner when I hear my husband's car in the driveway way earlier than usual. He comes through the door and his face is gray and he's carrying a cardboard box with his desk stuff in it, and I know before he says anything. He sets the box down on the kitchen counter and just stands there looking at me and finally says, he got fired. Not performance improvement plan, not suspended, actually terminated. His boss told him the company can't afford to keep someone who's been representing other people's work as their own, and that they'd discovered the extent of what he couldn't actually do. He's panicking now, pacing back and forth in the kitchen, asking me what he's supposed to do now and how he's going to explain this to anyone. I feel this twist of guilt watching him fall apart like this, seeing him. So lost and scared, but I also feel something else running underneath it. This weird sense of relief that the truth is finally out in the open where everyone can see it. He keeps asking me what to do, and I realize he's still waiting for me to fix this somehow. To make it better. To tell him the next move. I take a breath and tell him I met with a headhunter today, and I'm going to start interviewing for consulting positions. He stops pacing and stares at me like I just told him I'm planning to move to another planet. He asks what I know about consulting, and his voice has this edge to it like the question is supposed to be obvious. I remind him as calmly as I can that I've been doing his consulting work for 11 years. He gets angry then. Really angry. His face going red and his voice getting loud. He says I did this on purpose, that I sabotaged him deliberately, that I destroyed his entire career out of spite over one stupid comment at a party. I let him yell for a while because I figure he needs to get it out, and also because part of me knew this was coming. When he finally stops to take a breath, I ask him if he even remembers what that comment was. He opens his mouth and then closes it again, and I watch him try to pull up the memory. He can't repeat it exactly. He says something vague about it being a joke, and that everyone there knew he was kidding around, and that I'm being way too sensitive about the whole thing. I tell him it wasn't the first time he made me feel small in front of other people, and it won't be the last time if I stay in this marriage. He tries to argue, but I walk out of the kitchen and go upstairs to the guest room and lock the door behind me. The next week, I have 3 interviews lined up, and Ryan spent an hour on the phone with me the night before coaching me on how to talk about my experience. He told me to focus on strategic communications and executive presentations and business analysis without mentioning my husband at all, to frame it as freelance consulting work I've been doing. The first company is impressed by my portfolio and asks detailed questions about my process. The second company wants to know if I can start right away. The third company offers me a consulting contract on the spot pending a background check. I drive home from that last interview feeling like I'm floating, but also like I might throw up. Meanwhile, my husband spends his days at home now sending out resumes that I don't help him write. I see them sometimes when he leaves his laptop open on the kitchen table. And they're terrible, just absolutely awful, full of buzzwords that don't mean anything and claims he can't back up, and these obvious gaps in actual skills that any recruiter would spot immediately. He asks me one morning if I'll just look at his resume and give him some feedback, and I tell him no. He gets mad and says I'm being petty, and I say maybe I am, but I'm done doing his work for him. His mother calls me on a Tuesday afternoon while I'm reviewing the contract from the third company. She's crying before I even say hello, and she begs me to help him just enough to get another job. She says I'm being cruel, and that marriage means supporting each other through hard times, and that I made vows in front of God and family. I let her talk until she runs out of steam, and then I remind her that I supported him for 11 years, while he took all the credit and thanked me by telling people I should stay quiet and look pretty. She hangs up on me before I can say anything else, and I sit there staring at my phone for a minute, feeling this weird mix of relief and guilt. The guilt doesn't last long, though, because my phone rings again, and this time it's Natalie calling me back about the interviews. She sounds excited right away, asking if I'm sitting down because one of the firms wants to make me an offer. I ask her which one, and she says the tech consulting company, the second interview I did, and they want me as a senior consultant. The salary she tells me makes my stomach flip, because it's almost exactly what my husband was making at his old job before everything fell apart. She keeps talking about performance bonuses and benefits, and how this is exactly the kind of opportunity I deserve after hiding my skills for so long. I tell her I need to think about it, and she laughs, saying there's nothing to think about, that I should take this and start building my own career finally. After we hang up, I just sit in the kitchen holding my phone and feeling dizzy with all the possibilities opening up in front of me. 3 days later, I'm sitting in Audrey Rogers' office downtown, and she's nothing like I expected a divorce lawyer to be. She's straightforward and direct. No fake sympathy or dramatic questions about my feelings. She asks me what I want out of this divorce, and I realize I don't actually know yet beyond just getting out of the marriage. She writes something down and asks what I'm willing to fight for, what assets matter most to me, what I can live with, and what I absolutely can't accept. I tell her about the house, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio that we built together, even though only his name was on most of the paychecks. Audrey nods and asks if I have documentation of my contributions to his career, and I tell her I have 11 years worth of files proving I did his actual work. She looks up from her notepad with this expression that's almost a smile and says that changes everything. She explains that since my work directly contributed to his income for over a decade, I have a really strong case for significant asset division. The house we bought 5 years ago, the retirement accounts he's been funding, the investment portfolio his financial advisor set up, all of it was built on income I helped him earn even if my name wasn't on his paychecks. She talks about spousal contribution and economic partnership and a bunch of legal terms that basically mean I'm entitled to half of everything we built together. I ask her how long this process usually takes, and she says it depends on whether he wants to fight or settle, but either way she can make sure I get what I deserve. I leave Audrey's office feeling like I can actually breathe for the first time in months, and I stop at a coffee shop on the way home to think about everything she said. When I get back to the house, it's almost dinner time and my husband's car is already in the driveway, which surprises me because he usually stays out late now, avoiding coming home. I go inside and head straight upstairs to the guest room where I've been sleeping, and that's when I notice Audrey's business card is missing from my desk. My stomach drops because I know exactly what that means. He comes into the guest room maybe 10 minutes later without knocking, and he's holding the card in his hand, asking if I'm really going to throw away 11 years of marriage over his pride and stupidity. I look at him standing there in the doorway, and I tell him I'm not throwing anything away, that I'm finally picking something up that I should have grabbed a long time ago. He steps into the room and closes the door behind him, asking what that's supposed to mean, and I say it means I'm done being invisible, done doing his work while he takes credit, done pretending his success was anything other than my labor. That's when he really breaks down. Not the angry, yelling kind of breakdown, but the scared, desperate kind where he actually admits he doesn't know how to do any of it without me. He sits down on the edge of the bed and puts his head in his hands, saying he'll go to therapy. He'll change everything. He'll tell everyone the truth about my contributions if I'll just stay and help him figure out how to rebuild his career. He's crying now, actual tears running down his face, begging me not to give up on us. I watch him fall apart, and I feel this strange distance, like I'm seeing him clearly for the first time in years. I ask him a question that's been sitting in my chest for months, whether he's sorry he humiliated me in front of everyone, or if he's just sorry he got caught being incompetent without my help. He opens his mouth to answer right away, but then stops, and I watch him actually think about it, trying to figure out what I want to hear, versus what's actually true. The silence stretches out between us for maybe 30 seconds, and that pause tells me everything I need to know about his real motivations. The next morning, I call Natalie back and tell her I'm accepting the consulting position. She screams so loud I have to pull the phone away from my ear, and then she's talking fast about start dates and onboarding and how proud she is of me. My first project is helping a tech company restructure their communication strategy, which is exactly the kind of work I've been doing in secret for over a decade, except now my name will be on it, and I'll get paid what it's actually worth. I spend the rest of the week preparing for my start date, buying professional clothes that fit me instead of just wearing whatever was comfortable for sitting at home, getting my hair cut, feeling like I'm becoming a real person again instead of just someone's shadow. My first day at the new job is scary and exciting at the same time in a way I haven't felt since college. I walk into the office and people actually introduce themselves to me, shake my hand, welcome me to the team like I matter. The morning meeting is about the tech company project, and my new boss asks me to share my initial thoughts on their communication problems. I talk for maybe 5 minutes about what I noticed in their materials and how they could improve their messaging, and people are actually listening, taking notes, nodding along like what I'm saying makes sense. After the meeting, 3 different people come up to thank me for my ideas, and one woman asks if I can review her presentation draft later that week. I sit at my new desk with my name on a placard and my title printed on my business cards. And I realize I've been invisible for so long that I actually forgot what it felt like to be seen by other people as someone with value. That same week, my husband gets a job offer, and he tells me about it one night when I come home late from work. It's 3 levels below where he was before, at a much smaller company in the suburbs, and the salary is about 40% of what he used to make. He asks me if I think he should take it, and I look at him sitting there on the couch in sweatpants at 8 at night, and I tell him that's his decision to make, not mine. He says he wants my opinion, and I say my opinion is that he needs to start making his own choices about his own career without asking me to do the thinking for him. He gets quiet, and then asks if this is really how it's going to be now, with me refusing to help him with anything. And I tell him this is how it should have been all along, with both of us responsible for our own professional lives, instead of me carrying us both. He accepts the position the next week because there's nothing else available and his savings are running low. The company is smaller, the office is in a bland building near the highway, and his new boss is maybe 30 years old with a degree from a state school. His first day, he comes home at 7 looking like he ran a marathon, loosening his tie and heading straight for the whiskey. I ask how it went, and he just shakes his head and says he had to spend 4 hours learning their project tracking system, because apparently every company uses different software and he never actually learned any of them. The basic work he's doing now, stuff like reviewing contracts and updating client files, takes him twice as long as it should because he's actually reading everything himself, instead of having me summarize the important parts. 2 weeks in, he's getting up at 5 in the morning to prep for meetings, staying late to finish reports that should take an hour but take him 4, coming home too tired to do anything except eat and collapse on the couch. I watch him struggle and I don't feel guilty anymore, just this weird distance like I'm observing someone I used to know. I start seeing a therapist the following month because I need to talk to someone about the anger that keeps bubbling up at random times. The therapist is a woman in her 50s who doesn't waste time with small talk, just asks me straight out what I want to get from our sessions. I tell her I'm processing a marriage that's ending, and she asks what I got out of the relationship in the first place. I sit there for a long minute trying to come up with an answer that sounds reasonable. Financial security, I finally say, and a sense of purpose even if that purpose was making someone else successful. She writes something down and asks if I ever felt like an equal partner, and I laugh because the question answers itself. The sessions help me see how much I gave up without even noticing, how I made myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared completely. 2 months into my consulting job, my boss calls me into her office and tells me I'm leading the pitch for a major tech client. It's the kind of high-stakes presentation my husband used to do with my material, except this time I'm the one standing in front of the executives and everyone knows the ideas came from my brain. I spend a week preparing, working late in my actual office with my actual name on the door, feeling this mix of terror and excitement that I haven't felt in years. The presentation day arrives and I walk into that conference room wearing a suit I bought with my own money, carrying slides I created myself, ready to prove I can do this without hiding behind anyone. The client's CEO asks tough questions and I answer every single one without hesitation, because I actually understand the strategy I'm proposing, instead of just memorizing talking points someone else wrote. They ask about implementation timelines, budget considerations, risk factors, and I have answers for all of it because this is what I've been doing for over a decade. The presentation runs 90 minutes, and by the end the CEO is nodding and making notes and asking his team what they think about moving forward. 3 days later, my boss tells me the client signed a 2-year contract worth more than I ever imagined. She takes me aside after the team celebration and says I'm exactly the kind of talent they've been trying to recruit for years. The bonus check that arrives the next week is more money than I ever saw from any of my husband's successes, and it has my name on it. My husband finds me in the kitchen one night and asks if we can try marriage counseling before I file for divorce. He's lost weight. He looks older somehow, and there's this desperate edge to his voice that I've never heard before. I agree to 3 sessions, not because I think it will save anything, but because I want to understand how we ended up here. The first counseling session happens on a Tuesday evening in an office that smells like lavender and has too many plants. The counselor asks my husband to describe what I do for work now, and he struggles, getting basic facts wrong, saying something about consulting but admitting he hasn't really been paying attention to the details. Then the counselor asks him to describe what I used to do for him, and he lists every single task in perfect detail, the presentations and emails and strategy documents and research and editing and all of it. The counselor lets the silence sit there for a minute before pointing out that he knows exactly what I'm worth when it benefits him, but can't be bothered to learn about my life when it doesn't. My husband argues that he's been stressed about his new job, that he's been struggling to keep up, that he hasn't had mental energy for anything else. The counselor isn't buying it and asks him how much time he spent asking me about my work versus talking about his own problems. He doesn't have an answer for that. After the 3rd session, I tell him in the parking lot that I'm filing for divorce. He asks for more time, says we're making progress, says he's starting to understand what he did wrong. I tell him I'm done waiting for him to see me as an equal partner instead of a resource he lost access to. He stands there next to his car looking lost, and I drive away without looking back. Audrey files the paperwork the following week, and my husband hires Philip Stevens, some expensive lawyer his father is paying for. Philip immediately tries to argue that I'm not entitled to half of everything since I wasn't employed during most of the marriage. Audrey comes back with a flash drive full of files, every single presentation and email, and strategy document I created over 11 years. all with computer records showing I made them, timestamps proving when I did the work, proof that his entire career was built on my brain. Philip's argument falls apart within days, and I hear through Audrey that he told my husband's father this is going to be an expensive divorce if they keep fighting the obvious truth. 2 weeks later, his mother calls and asks me to come to their house for a family meeting. I almost say no, but something in her voice sounds different, less accusatory and more tired, so I agree to drive over on Saturday afternoon. The house looks the same as always, perfectly maintained lawn and expensive cars in the driveway. But when I walk in, everyone's sitting in the living room looking uncomfortable. His father's in his usual chair, his mother's on the couch next to my husband who looks like he hasn't slept in days, and his brother and sister are standing by the fireplace. His mother starts by saying they've all been talking and they think maybe we should consider working things out now that we're both employed and things are more equal. His father adds that divorce is a big decision, and maybe we rushed into it, that every marriage has rough patches. My husband looks at me with this hopeful expression like he thinks I might actually agree. I sit down in the chair across from them and take a breath before explaining that this isn't about us both having jobs now. It's about 11 years where he had everything, and I had nothing, where my work built his reputation while he told people I should stay quiet and look pretty. I tell them he never acknowledged any of it until his career fell apart, and he had no choice. That he didn't suddenly respect me when I got my consulting job, he just got scared when he realized I didn't need him anymore. His sister surprises everyone by nodding slowly and saying she gets it, that she's been thinking about all those years of family dinners where he talked about his accomplishments and nobody ever asked what I did all day. His mother starts to argue, but his sister cuts her off and says, maybe I have a point, that it's easy to say things are equal now, but that doesn't erase what happened before. The room goes quiet, and my husband looks at his sister like she just betrayed him. His father tries to bring the conversation back to reconciliation, but I'm already standing up, thanking them for trying, but telling them my decision is final. I drive home feeling lighter somehow, like his sister's acknowledgement mattered more than I expected it to. The mediation happens 3 weeks later in a conference room that smells like coffee and stress. My husband sits across from me with his lawyer while Audrey sits next to me with her organized folders and calm expression. The mediator walks us through the assets, the house we bought together, the retirement accounts, the investment portfolio that grew during the years I was supporting his career. We agree to sell the house and split everything 50-50, dividing it all down the middle like we're splitting up after a business partnership instead of a marriage. My husband's lawyer tries to bring up alimony, arguing that since I'm making more money now, I should help support him during his transition to a lower-paying job. Audrey shuts it down immediately, pulling out documentation of all the work I did that built his career, pointing out that I supported him for 11 years without any compensation while he collected the salary and benefits. The mediator agrees that alimony doesn't make sense given the circumstances, and my husband's lawyer backs off. We sign the initial agreements and schedule the final paperwork for next month. Walking out of that building, I feel exhausted but relieved, like we're finally untangling 11 years of my life being wrapped around his. 4 months after the anniversary party, I sit in Audrey's office and sign the divorce papers. My husband sits across the table looking smaller than I remember, older somehow, like the weight of actually being responsible for himself finally settled on his shoulders where it belongs. He signs his part without looking at me, and we're done. The mediator stamps everything and files it with the court. I walk out into the parking lot and sit in my car for a few minutes just breathing, processing the fact that I'm actually divorced now, that the marriage is legally over. I drive to work and throw myself into a client presentation, pushing the morning's events into a corner of my mind to deal with later. The condo I find is downtown, 20 minutes from my office, smaller than the house, but it's mine. I sign the lease and move in over a weekend, hiring movers to bring my furniture and boxes from storage. The place has big windows and hardwood floors, and I decorate it exactly how I want, hanging art I actually like instead of the boring corporate stuff my husband preferred. I organize the kitchen my way, set up my home office in the second bedroom, arrange everything without having to consider anyone else's opinion or needs. Living alone feels strange at first, too quiet, but then I realize the quiet is peaceful instead of tense. I'm not managing anyone else's schedule or cleaning up after someone who can't figure out how to load a dishwasher. It's just me and my stuff, and my space. Natalie shows up on moving day with wine and takeout containers. We sit on my new couch surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, and she raises her glass, saying she's proud of me for finally choosing myself. The words hit me harder than I expect because that's exactly what this is. Not revenge or spite or punishment, just me finally putting myself first after 11 years of making him the priority. We drink the wine and eat the food and talk about everything except my ex-husband, planning a trip we want to take and discussing Natalie's latest work project. She leaves around midnight and I fall asleep in my new bedroom feeling more content than I have in years. 6 months into my job at the consulting firm, my boss calls me into her office. I walk in expecting another project assignment, but instead she tells me I'm being promoted to principal consultant. The title comes with a significant raise and more responsibility, leading bigger projects and mentoring junior consultants. She says I'm on track for partner if I keep performing at this level, that the firm sees me as someone with real leadership potential. I thank her and walk back to my desk feeling proud of myself in a way I never felt watching my husband accept awards for work I did. This is mine, earned by my actual effort and skill, recognized by people who know exactly what I contributed. 3 weeks later, I'm grabbing coffee before work when I see my husband's brother in line ahead of me. He turns around and recognizes me, his face going through several expressions before settling on something apologetic. We end up sitting at a corner table with our drinks, and he tells me he's sorry for not seeing what was happening, that he talked to his brother recently, and realizes how bad things actually were. He says my ex-husband is struggling but learning, working at their father's company now and slowly figuring out how to do basic tasks without help. He asks if I'm doing okay, and I tell him honestly that I'm doing better than okay, that I'm actually happy for the first time in years. He nods and says he's glad, that I deserve to be happy. We finish our coffee and part ways on friendly terms, and I realize I don't feel angry at him anymore, just relieved that at least someone in that family understands. 8 months after the anniversary party, I'm sitting in a client meeting when my phone buzzes with an email from Audrey. The subject line says the divorce is finalized, officially processed by the court, completely done. I feel this enormous weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't even realize I was still carrying, like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale. The meeting continues around me and I participate normally, but inside I'm celebrating, marking this moment as the real end of that chapter of my life. That evening I get home and check my personal email to find a message from my ex-husband. The subject line says we should talk, and the message asks if I'll meet him for coffee, that he wants to discuss everything that happened. I read it twice and then close my email without responding. There's nothing left to say between us. No conversation that would change anything or make either of us feel better. He knows what he did, I know what I'm worth, and we're both living with the consequences of those truths now. I delete the email and move on with my evening, making dinner in my quiet kitchen and feeling grateful for the life I'm building without him. A week later, Natalie texts me saying she has someone I should meet, a guy from her company who just went through a divorce and might be good to grab coffee with. I agree mostly because turning her down feels harder than just going, and 2 days later I'm sitting across from this man at a coffee shop, feeling like I forgot how to have a normal conversation. He asks what I do, and I tell him about the consulting work, expecting his eyes to glaze over like my ex-husband's always did. But instead he leans forward and asks specific questions about the projects I'm working on. He wants to know about my approach to corporate restructuring, what challenges I face with resistant clients, how I got into this field. I answer honestly, and he actually listens, asks follow-up questions, remembers details I mentioned earlier in the conversation. The whole thing lasts almost 2 hours, and when we're leaving, he says he'd like to do this again sometime. I say maybe and mean it, which surprises me. That weekend, I start teaching a workshop on professional communication and presentation skills at the community college. 12 people show up, mostly younger professionals trying to advance their careers, and I spend 4 hours walking them through everything I know about crafting clear messages and delivering confident presentations. During the break, a woman in her 30s asks how I learned all this, and I tell her the truth without sugarcoating it. I spent 11 years doing this work for someone else, making him look brilliant while I stayed invisible, and I finally realized I could do it for myself instead. The room gets quiet, and a few people nod like they understand exactly what I mean. The next week, the same woman stays after class, waiting until everyone else leaves before approaching me. She tells me her husband works at the same company she does, and he keeps taking credit for her ideas in meetings, presenting her solutions as his own insights. Her voice shakes when she asks how I found the courage to stop enabling it, and I have to think about my answer because courage feels like the wrong word. I tell her it wasn't courage. It was just finally getting angry enough to choose myself over his comfort. She writes that down in her notebook like it's something important to remember. 3 weeks later, I'm at work when my ex-husband's brother calls my cell phone. I almost don't answer, but curiosity wins, and I pick up on the 4th ring. He tells me straight out that his brother got laid off. The company downsized, and he was one of the first to go since he'd only been there 8 months, and his performance reviews weren't great. The brother isn't asking for anything, isn't begging me to help. He's just informing me like he thinks I should know. I feel something twist in my chest, but it's not quite sympathy, and definitely not satisfaction either. Just this strange, empty feeling like watching something inevitable finally happen. I thank him for telling me, and we hang up after 30 seconds. 2 days later, I run into a mutual friend at the grocery store, and she tells me my ex-husband moved back in with his parents and started working as a project coordinator at his father's small business. The job matches his actual skill level, she says carefully, and I nod because that's probably the kindest way to describe it. I hope he's learning to be okay with honest work that reflects what he can actually do instead of what I made him look like he could do. 10 months after the anniversary party where everything fell apart, I'm leading a team of 5 consultants on a major corporate restructuring project for a manufacturing company. My name is on the proposal, my strategy is guiding every decision, and when the client thanks us in the final presentation, They're looking directly at me and using my name. One of my team members sends me a message afterward saying it's inspiring to work under someone who actually knows what they're doing, and I save that message because it means more than any award my ex-husband ever accepted for my work. I schedule a check-in session with my therapist because it feels like a good time to process how far things have come. She asks if I feel vindicated now that my ex-husband's real abilities are public knowledge, and his career matches his actual competence. I think about it for a minute before answering that no. I don't feel vindicated because that would mean I'm still measuring myself against him. I feel free instead. Finally past the point where his success or failure has anything to do with my worth. She smiles and writes something in her notes and tells me that's real growth. My year-end bonus comes through bigger than I expected, and I take myself to a jewelry store downtown. I buy a beautiful watch, the kind of expensive luxury item I never felt entitled to when I was invisible, and all the money was technically his, even though I helped earn it. The salesperson wraps it carefully, and I wear it out of the store, checking the time 3 times on the walk back to my car. Every time I look at it for the next week, I'm reminded that my work has actual value and my time belongs to me now. Natalie and I take a vacation to celebrate my 1-year anniversary at the consulting firm, flying to a beach resort where we spend 4 days doing absolutely nothing productive. On the last evening, we're sitting on the sand watching the sunset, and she asks if I have any regrets about how everything went down. I think about it honestly instead of giving her an easy answer. I regret the lost time, the years I spent making someone else look good while I disappeared into the background. But I don't regret leaving. Don't regret burning it all down once I finally got angry enough to choose myself. The next morning, I'm checking my email before our flight home, and there's a LinkedIn message from a woman whose name I recognize. She used to work with my ex-husband, sat in meetings where he presented my ideas as his own brilliant insights. Her message says she always suspected I was the actual brains behind his success, and she's starting her own consulting firm now. She wants to know if I'd be interested in doing some contract work for her, maybe building a longer partnership if things go well. I read it twice and feel something settle into place, this understanding that my reputation is finally my own instead of something attached to someone else's name. I respond to her message saying yes, and we set up a meeting for the following week. The startup consulting project turns out to be exactly what I needed without knowing I needed it. The founder is a woman about my age who built a tech company from nothing, and actually wants my input instead of just using my brain as a free resource. We sit in strategy sessions, and she listens when I talk, writes down my suggestions, asks follow-up questions that show she's actually processing what I'm saying. Within 2 days of our first meeting, she implements 3 of my recommendations and emails me to say they're already seeing results. In the project debrief with her team, she tells everyone that my analysis changed their entire approach, and she uses my name 4 times in 10 minutes. I realize this is what real collaboration looks like, not me hiding in the background while someone else takes credit and calls it teamwork. 3 weeks into the project, I'm at the grocery store loading vegetables into my cart when I see his mother in the dairy aisle. She looks up, sees me, and her face does this complicated thing where she's clearly trying to decide whether to pretend she didn't notice me or be polite. She chooses polite, gives me a small smile and a nod, says hello in this careful voice like she's talking to someone who might bite. I say hello back and ask how she's doing. She says fine, asks about my work, and I can tell from her tone that she still thinks I destroyed her son on purpose, that I'm the villain in whatever story she tells herself. We talk for maybe 90 seconds about nothing important, and then she says she should go and I watch her walk away, knowing some people will never understand that I didn't destroy him. I just stopped holding him up. 1 year after the anniversary party where everything fell apart, I'm leading a project team of 7 people. My name is on proposals that actually get implemented, and I'm making more money than I ever did being invisible. My ex-husband is somewhere working at his dad's company doing project coordination that matches what he can actually do, and I hope he's learning to be okay with honest work instead of borrowed success. We're both better off apart, him living within his real abilities, and me finally using mine for myself, instead of pretending they belong to someone else. I'm having dinner with my team after we close a major deal that took 4 months of hard work, and we're at this nice restaurant celebrating because the client signed a 2-year contract extension based on results we actually delivered. Someone at the table, one of the senior consultants, stands up with his wine glass and says he wants to make a toast to my brilliant strategy work that made this whole thing possible. Everyone else picks up their glasses and they're all looking at me, saying my name, talking about specific things I did that made the difference, and I feel this weird tightness in my chest that takes me a second to recognize as happiness. Not the credit itself mattering so much, but the simple fact that they see me, they know I exist, they acknowledge that my work has value, and I'm the one who did it. That's what I was missing for 11 years. Just being visible and having that visibility connected to my actual contributions instead of someone else's face.